But right now, always a pleasure to welcome to the program Congressman Adam Kinzinger. How are you, sir?
Hey, good morning. How are you guys doing?
We're doing really well. Now, the big question of the day, we got to hit you with it right off the bat. What's going to happen with Scotland?
Oh, you know what? Look, my prediction is they vote for independence. So there's this theory that if you watch primaries, for instance, primaries it's hard to tell polling. It's more easier to tell, like, passion, whereas, if a candidate in a primary is down 30 points and then election day he's down 5 or 10 points, typically that candidate will win because the passion's with him. I think that's what's going to happen in Scotland. This is it's actually kind of frightening. It's not good for England and for our alliance with them. But
and NATO too. NATO will take it's not a huge hit to remove Scotland, but at the same point, it does leave an opening.
Yeah, it's interesting because Scotland has the only nuclear Navy base for the Brits. That's going to be interesting. They might gitmo that thing and basically say we're going to keep it, even though it's in Scotland. And Scotland has all of England's banks. There are a lot of them, so those banks are going to pull out. And, then I think UK is going to deny Scotland a currency union. So this thing could be worse for the Scots than people realize. So, it's fun to talk about it. It might be fun to see it actually play out until we actually see the impact of it.
Yeah, starting with bank runs, because I was just reading about banks in Edinburgh stockpiling as much cash as they possibly can in anticipation of it.
Yeah, they're going to up out, I think, if that's the case. So that'll be, the Scots, they ought to really be thinking about what they're, although you probably don't have a huge Scotch audience listening.
Well, we don't know until we make them mad.
Yeah, now they call.
We actually have a large audience drinking Scotch at 7:36, but not a large Scotch.
Start with ourselves.
Eye opener to get the day going.
Sure.
Congressman Adam Kinzinger with us, Illinois 16th District. Big vote yesterday in the House authorizing the president provide weapons training to the Free Syrian Army. There was some talk that was going to be a tight vote. It didn't turn out that way. A large majority of Republicans and about a split on the Democratic side of supporting this bill. Does this do all that's needed to take on ISIS? Are we even close to understanding what might be needed to take on ISIS here?
No, it's the furthest thing from it. I mean, this is not a strategy. This is not a plan to crush ISIS. This is the very beginning of many, many things that need to be done in order to really destroy this cancer that's growing. When I made the decision to vote for this, it came down to 2 points. Number one, look, the president's the commander-in-chief. We don't like him. I wish he was not elected. But he is a commander-in-chief for 2.5 more years. And this is what he determined is a good first move in fighting ISIS. I believe it's a good move as well. If we would have denied him that, we would have taken away basically his authority to be commander-in-chief. And we would have not had a commander-in-chief for 2.5 years. And I would much rather have a flawed commander-in-chief, in essence, than no commander at all. And it would have sent a very bad message to our allies and to our enemies that Congress is not standing behind. There's not this idea of once we leave the shores, we're all Americans anymore. But, no, there's a lot he needs to do. He needs a robust air campaign in Syria. He needs to begin to have a moderate fighting opposition. And I don't think he should be taking troops on the ground off the table. I don't think he needs them yet, but he shouldn't be taking them off the table. There's a lot more that he needs to go, including cutting off their financing. But this is the first step, and we'll see what he does from here.
I was just going to follow up on that, Congressman, because I was watching the president yesterday speaking and promising troops that they will not be on the ground in Iraq. I will not put you in an underground invasion. We won't use troops. And I'm wondering, it seems like I think Jim Garrity from National Review has said this often. Every promise from the president comes with an expiration date. And then an explanation about why it expired. He wasn't talking about ISIS when he called them the JV. He meant the other big terrorist organization, even though we know he was talking about it. So how long might it be until he's got to say, I never said that we wouldn't have boots on the ground. It is what we need now.
Well, it's funny because just a month ago he called the Free Syrian Army a bunch of doctors and lawyers. He said it's a fallacy that, a lot of this problem is because he didn't arm them. And now he's saying he wants to arm them, which I agree with him. He needs to arm them. Look, it's. I don't understand the boots on the ground thing. I don't understand. I was ticked yesterday when I heard him standing in front of a bunch of military people and saying, "I won't commit you to another war in Iraq." We're the military. I mean, these guys are probably like, "Let us go kill our enemies." I mean, the U.S. military is not some fragile puppy that needs nurtured. The U.S. military is fierce. Their job is to kill our enemies, and they want to go do it. don't stand in front of a bunch of U.S. military people and say, you guys are so fragile, I'm not going to use you. It was ridiculous, and he's once again just, he's a terrible leader. He does not understand, leadership, period, is what it comes down to, and there's a whole bunch of other issues there, too. Look, it'll bite him in the butt. I think at the end of the day, President Obama's plan is to contain the problem of ISIS, which I'd rather have him contain it than do nothing, to contain the problem of ISIS and let the next president destroy him. I really think that's what he's thinking.
And, you had mentioned that, you don't want to hamstring a commander-in-chief to where we don't want to have one for the next 2.5 years. You'd rather have a flawed one than hamstring one. But, you'd be contributing to his own effort, it seems, because he hamstrings himself constantly, stepping out and saying we don't have any strategy. And as you mentioned, this whole boots-on-the-ground thing, if you don't think ISIS is paying attention to every word that comes out of his mouth, they certainly are, and telegraphing the fact that we're not going to put boots on the ground like he telegraphed the fact when we were going to leave, all of the things that, well, traditionally in warfare you don't see.
Yeah, look, I have a theory here. I mean, the guy's been raised in liberal academia, and this is no offense to anybody that's in academia. That's very important, but, he sits around, before he became president and senator and, drink cocktails and sit around and talk about, the hurts of the world and sit in a comfortable place and talk about it. He's never been raised in an environment, which a lot of people are, where you learn how to be tough. You learn how to take a strong stand. And that, if the bully's punching you in the face, once you stand up and say, I'm going to punch you right back, it's probably going to end without violence. I mean, that idea of, in essence, how to be a tough man, you never had that. So this idea that Putin's walking all over him, the president doesn't realize, and maybe he does, he just can't take himself to say it, if I would, put military patrols near Ukraine and say, look, if you cross this line, you will be destroyed, that the Russian military will be destroyed, and so therefore it won't happen. And same with ISIS, same with threatening everything. They're going to be scared. So, he just doesn't understand how to do it, and I think, unfortunately, in international politics, it's really hurting us.
Congressman Adam Kinzinger with us here. It's Riley and Scott on WROK. News this morning, Australian counterterrorism forces detaining 15 people, raids, intelligence that the Islamic State, ISIS, planning public beheadings of random people in 2 Australian cities. Now, Chuck Hagel has said this is unlike anything we've ever dealt with before. They're dangerous, very dangerous, well-funded. The president says we're safer than we've ever been. There's no indication that we're going to have an attack here in the U.S. What do you think? What is the threat of an attack here in the U.S. by ISIS?
Well, first off, God bless the Australians. They're incredible. Look, ISIS has made it. Here's the point. So back in January, we've had this conversation 100 times on your station. Back in January, I said we need to bomb these guys. There were 1,500 of them then. Mm-hmm. I didn't even see them as a threat to the United States. I saw them as a threat to our ally in Iraq. Today, there's 35, probably 40,000 of these 8 months later. They have made it very clear that their intention is to strike the United States eventually, whether it's not now, but eventually. Or they could even do it now. So are they an imminent threat? Are they an eventual threat? The answer is yes. They're a threat to us that if left unchecked, eventually they're going to attack us here. I mean, it's like Nazi Germany, right? Nazi Germany, at the moment we went to war with Germany, was not a direct threat to the United States. I mean, we didn't have any fear that Nazi troops were going to come up on the shores of Los Angeles or New York City. But we did know that they were a threat to our allies in the region and eventually would be a direct threat to the United States. And we also knew about the human tragedy we suspected the human tragedy that was going on in Europe. We were right to go after the Nazis, and we'll be right to go after ISIS today.
And, and maybe I'm old school. Well, I am old school. The idea, the idea that another nation threatens us or another group of people threatens us with harm, destruction, death, and all that, I believe requires an answer.
I do too. I mean, it absolutely does when you are blessed with the ability to do it, especially. I'm worried about this kind of creeping woe is us attitude that I've heard from some of my colleagues, frankly, out in D.C. It's like, why does it always have to be the United States? Why do we always have to do it? I frankly think we ought to be proud of the fact that when there's injustice in the world, when there's a threat to the Western way of life, people look to the United States because we are the world leader, we have the ability to do something, and they look at us to protect them. That's something we ought to embrace and be proud of, I think.
Congressman Adam Kinzinger, before we let you go here, back to the bill that was voted upon yesterday, something else that it did was extend the CR, right? A CR to continue government funding through December 11th. That's past the election. So as long as the Senate does its job, we shouldn't be hearing any scary, fear-mongering over Republicans wanting to shut down the government here soon, right?
Yeah, that's what's funny is the Democrats were actually upset that we're putting this, the Free Syrian Army issue in the continuing resolution because they wanted to vote against it, and now they had to vote for it. So, because they wanted us to go into government shutdown mode because it would have been good for them. But no, that's not going to be an issue, at least in the time soon.
Well, outstanding to hear that. One card taken off the table. Congressman, as always, we appreciate you working us into your busy schedule.
Oh, of course, guys. I love talking to you. Take care.